Hey guys, Matthew, and as promised, I'm going to be making a step-by-step guide for every single one of the mirror tier items that we made this league. Some of them are going to be utilizing the Recombinators, some of them are not. And I decided that we were going to start where we actually started with our crafting this league, and that was with the first initial thing that we made, which was our physical bow. Now, the physical bow was definitely a good option in terms of first craft. It got 50 services at 50 exalt fee. For a total of 2,500 exalts that came back out of this bow, and we spent, well, I don't know exactly how much we spent, but we definitely spent a lot less than that. Now, we were generating quite a bit of currency through other things, but of course, when we actually hit the bow, at the time of hitting it, it was by far the best bow that had ever existed pretty much in a temp league, especially that early on, right? We're not talking about the last few weeks of league when someone hits something crazy, but we're talking about in terms of like super early stages, that thing was crazy. Which is why it got so many services so quickly. Now, of course, we've updated it since then. We've made a new one, and in today's video, we're going to be looking at the step-by-step guide on how both of those were made, but we're going to start off with Entropy Twine, which was the OG triple T1 Fizz plus 2 arrow crit unveiled bow. Okay, so I actually made a video similar to that lastly when we made, one of the best physical bows to ever exist in a temporary league. Actually, at the time when we made that bow, it was the best one. Due to the new tiers, of course, of modifiers, which was really, really good. But we upped it this time around because last league's bow had T2 hybrid physical damage, and this time we have Dictators, which is tier 1. So even our early game craft, if you will, was better than even our most end game craft of last league, and that is just thanks to Recombinators being absolutely insane. So now looking at this bow here, we're going to first off about Entropy Twine and how it was made. It all starts with essentially going back to the guide which was made by Iron on Reddit, which is the complete guide to Recombinators. I'll have that link in the description down below for people who are interested. And we're going to go ahead and open this right here, which is going to give us a bit of a chart of what to expect in terms of affixes and mod distribution. So we are trying to get triple T1 prefixes, and there's not really any good way to do that in the old methods. Now, for example, if you were to head over to Path of Exile and you were to look at a bow, the odds of actually hitting, let's just say with a jagged fossil, right, which is for physical, the odds of hitting triple tier 1, which would be flaring alongside merciless and dictators, is literally bar none. It would take you on average 7.3 million fossils in order to hit that, and the confidence level is 63%, which means that if you were to do that 100 times, only 63 of those times you would actually end up getting all 3 modifiers, and that is 7 million fossils. Okay, now the alternate method, which is what we did last league, is that we essentially are going to alteration spam for one of the rarest mods, which is going to be either dictators or merciless, because flaring is 10 times easier to get than the other two. And then we're going to reforge craft on prefixes cannot be changed, and then we're going to reforge physical over and over and over with imprints. And we went through literally thousands of imprints last league until we finally hit T2, which was Emperor. At that point, once you actually have the Emperor and the Merciless, it's not done yet because you still got to get the flaring. And the only real way to do that is to augment physical. So what you do is you wipe off your suffixes, you multi-mod leech, mana, and life, which are suffixes on the bench but are prefixes on the actual bow. And then when you go ahead and aug, because you can't roll those, you're guaranteed to get flat fizz. You're not guaranteed a good amount of flat fizz, but you are guaranteed a flat physical. So in our case, when we did that last league, we ended up with flaring after spending, I believe, 7 mirrors on the prefixes alone, which was actually considered quite lucky. We were done with our prefixes. Okay, now let's talk about the new age of crafting, which is Recombinators. Now, I'm expecting those to go away after this league because they're incredibly powerful, like way too strong. But you basically just need a bit of a bankroll to get going. So, looking back on the chart made by Iron, we can see that if we want 3 mods in our pool, or if we have 3 mods in our pool, the odds of actually ending up with 3 mods is only 20%. Which means that let's just say that you were to take a bow with flaring and merciless and another bow with dictators and nothing else, and you were to throw them together, it would take you 5 attempts on average to end up with all 3 prefixes. That's pretty bad. Okay. Now, let's look at what if you had 4 mods in the pool. Well, 35% of the time, you'll actually end up with 3 mods. That's already quite a bit better. It's almost doubling the odds of the 3 mods in the pool. And this is essentially what we had to go for. Now, the downside, and the reason why we can't go for 5 mods in the pool, is because if we had 5 mods in the pool already, it would essentially mean that we have one of them with prefixes done, right? Because there would be 3 prefixes on one item and 2 prefixes on the other, which means our bow would actually already be done. So what we had to go for was the for modifier. So how do we do that? Well, what we did essentially is we went for the absolute rarest modifier, which in this case is merciless and dictators, and we alteration spammed that, and then we prefixes cannot be changed, and we reforged physical. By reforging physical, we are guaranteed another physical modifier, and if you look on, for example, Path of Exile with a bow, right, of course, you're going to, first off, initially, you're going to alteration spam for merciless or dictators, but after that, you are basically going to look at, essentially, what is the odds of exalting a, physical, what is the odds of exalting a physical prefix if you have, let's just say that we had dictators, right? So we have dictators, what is the odds of actually exalting, because when you reforge is the equivalent of saying basically an exalt because only one mod is guaranteed. What is the odds of exalting that? And it's 82, right? So on average, it would take you 82 exalts of physical, so 82 augments if you had just this on your bow and you were just basically hitting it with an an augment fizz. Now, in reality, that's not quite true because when you do reforge fizz, you can also do reforge fizz more common, which is, you know, going to make it easier because it's going to give you more physical modifiers, but then you have to annul. Like, there's some RNG to it, but overall, it was around 100 or so imprints to get flaring on our bow to be at the point where we had basically dictators and flaring and nothing else, no other prefixes, and then we did the exact same thing for merciless and flaring, about 100 imprints once again, and then we had 2 bows, one with flaring dictators, one with flaring merciless, because of course merciless and dictators would be extremely hard to get by themselves. And then we basically had 4 mods in the pool. So looking back on the chart, we had 4 mods in the pool basically with overlapping of flaring, and then one had merciless and one had dictators, and then we basically just recombinated those. So there's a 35% chance that we ended up with 3 mods. That percentage was actually perfect for us because it took us 3 attempts to get it done. And the thing that's expensive is that every single attempt was costing us a spine bow, which was item level 86, which was synthesized with +1 arrow bow. These bases are not exactly cheap. Another thing, alteration spamming is not exactly cheap, but it's not that expensive. 100 imprints, that's like 80x or so, right? And that doesn't guarantee you anything either, right? So you spend 80x or whatever, then you have the flaring and say the dictators, then you another 80x for the flaring and the merciless. Then you need to have 2 of those bases, which are, I don't know, 50x each. That's another 100x. And then you essentially have 2 that are ready to go. You got to full send that, right? And you have a 35% chance, which means on average you're going to be losing, you know, 3 bases because you're going to end up utilizing 4 bases, but you don't lose both. You only lose 1 every single time. So you're going to lose 3 bases. It's going to cost you 4 bases. Let's just say 50x a pop. And that's just probably more than that, but let's just say that's 200x there. Then, of course, the 100x or so per bow for the imprints. So 100, 200, 300, 400. And then, of course, that doesn't tell you anything about the suffixes, right? So once you've done that, right, once you actually go through this process of doing the 4 modifiers, the flaring dictators and the flaring merciless, and you recombinate those together, you're going to end up with triple T1 prefixes. Now the next question is, how do you get the +2 arrows? And then now it's actually going to be the exact same thing as we used to do in previous leagues, because there's no way that you would actually recombinate and basically potentially lose your triple T1 prefixes, because that's really expensive, but that's also really annoying. It requires a lot of bases and stuff. Now, to be fair, you could recombinate a synthesized base with, say, merciless and flaring on a non-synthesized base with, say, dictators and flaring. You could do that, but when you do that, if it picks the wrong base and you lose the 50-50, you lose the base. And if you actually do create the prefixes on the non-synthesized base, it's going to feel really, really, really bad. So that's why we went with synthesized bases every step of the way to try to make it so as soon as we did hit the prefixes, we for sure had it on the right base. Now, you might think that the expensive part is done because we've already blown over 500x into this bow or something. Well, no, it's actually just starting. The prefixes are the easy part because of recombinators. What used to be the hardest part by far, these prefixes on a bow without recombinators would cost you around 20 mirrors at the time where we did it last league and we did the math on it. And it cost us 7 because we had T2, which is 3 times more likely, so we were just about average. Okay, now let's have a look at what if your prefixes are done, how do you actually go about getting the additional arrows? And that's going to be very simple, but very expensive. Even compared to the prefixes, it's going to be significantly more expensive. And essentially what we're going to look at is what is the odds if we exalt an attack suffix. So if only suffix is open and we exalt an attack, what is the odds of actually getting +1 arrow? And the average is 24. So what that means is that you're going to have to lock your prefixes and reforge attack until you get +1 arrow, right? Which is going to cost you on average about 50x to see it once. Now, when you get it once, you also need to make sure that you have no other suffixes with it because you're going to need to craft on prefixes cannot be changed, and then you're going to reforge more likely. By reforging more likely, there's going to be a 1 in 11 chance, if you will. Let's see. Yeah, there's going to be a 1 in 11 chance that your +2 arrow is, or your +1 arrow is actually going to turn into a +2 arrow. So on average, it's going to cost you 50x to see it, and then you're going to have to do this quite a few times, because when you reforge more likely, there will always be another affix added to your item. So let's just say that you have +1 arrow, no other suffixes, you craft on prefixes cannot be changed, you reforge more likely, and it gives you the +2 arrow instead of the +1 arrow. If you have any modifier which has an attack tag, like attack speed, crit chance, accuracy, life gain for each enemy, anything else alongside the +2 arrow, you are going to need to YOLO 50/50 annul by crafting prefixes cannot be changed and annulling. The upside is that if you get the +2 arrows with modifiers that don't have an attack mod, such as resistance, you can craft on cannot roll attack mods, as all the prefixes are attack based and the arrows are also attack based, and then you can just annul and it's going to safely remove, say, chaos resistance. Okay, now you might be thinking, okay, so I've probably spent about 500 or 600x or so on the suffixes in order to get +2 arrow. Where do I go from here? Well, that's the thing. You're not quite done spending currency yet, because the next thing you need to do is unveil. Now, in this case, we have unveiled critical strike chance and strength and intelligence, which is the best possible unveil on a spine bow. Alternatively, we could have also have unveiled attack speed and strength and dexterity or whatever. That would have also been basically the same equivalent, and we would have crafted crit chance instead. But yeah, pretty much the same thing. Okay, so what happens at this point, where you have the triple T1 prefixes and your +2 arrow and nothing else on your bow, is that you need to multi-mod. Then you need to craft on prefixes cannot be changed, which are both suffixes, and then you need to level 4 or tier 4 Eisling unveil. When you do that, there's a 33% chance that you actually brick your +2 arrows, and then you got to go back to reforging attack. That's another 500x to see it again. Or if you actually hit either the prefixes cannot be changed or the multi-mod, then you're actually potentially done, because again, there's a chance that you don't actually unveil the right thing. It's about a 30% chance to actually unveil what you really, really want, which is either the crit hybrid or the attack speed hybrid. But when you unveil, it's very important that you craft the bench mod damage per charges, because as you can see on the veiled modifier here, damage per charge, frenzy per charge, and power per charge are all quite common at 20% at 20% weighting, sorry. But if you block one of them, it actually blocks all three. So before you unveil, very important that you craft this. Now, when you actually do that, you'll actually have your +2 arrows, and then you'll unveil. And of course, if you don't hit either the crit chance quality, or sorry, the crit chance attributes or the attack speed attributes, you essentially need to choose a modifier, an unveiled modifier, which does not have an attack tag, and you're going to treat it like if it was, say, resistance. So let's just say you could go with double damage. Then you could craft on prefixes, or cannot roll attack mods, annul, in order to get rid of the double damage, and then you would multi-mod, prefixes cannot be changed, unveil again, and there's a 33% chance that you rip your arrows. If you don't hit the arrows, you get another shot at the unveil, and eventually, with enough of all those things, all those tries, you're going to end up with the +2 arrows and the right unveil, so either crit chance or attack speed, and then you can finally craft on the last affix. And that is essentially the step-by-step guide to crafting our bow. Now, for us, it took us 4 attempts on the prefixes, so we ripped, I believe, 3 bases, basically, before we actually got the triple T1 prefixes. So we got, no, it took us 3, so we actually ripped only 2 bases, so we were perfectly within average on the prefixes, so that wasn't too expensive. But of course, when we did that, the bases were significantly cheaper than they are now. After that, we did some, obviously, reforge attack. It probably cost us a few hundred exalts, 400 or 500 exalts. We got pretty lucky because we unveiled it on the first try. We didn't brick our arrows, and we actually unveiled the right modifier. In our case, we wanted critical strike chance or attack speed, and we got crit. So we just crafted on attack speed, and this bow was mirrored 50 times. So it's actually exactly the round number was 50. After 50 copies of this bow, we actually had hit the second bow, at which point we basically resign this one, and it's just going to probably just be augment speed, because there's a 1 in 18 chance that we hit tier 1 attack speed, and if we did, it would actually be a fully perfect 6 tier 1 modifier bow. Now that's extremely unlikely to happen, but who knows. The other option is that we recombinate it with some other bow, but we're not exactly sure about that just yet. Okay, so now let's talk about Havoc Mark. Now Havoc Mark is the upgraded version of Entropy Twine, because instead of having the unveiled critical strike chance and having the crafted crit, it actually has the tier 1 attack speed and the crafted crit. Now, or the crafted attack speed on Entropy Twine, but this one is crafted crit. So this one is honestly, at current times, one of the best physical bows to ever exist in the game, and by far the best physical bow to ever exist in a temp league. This thing is insane. It has 5 tier 1 modifiers that are some of the hardest ones to get in the entirety of the game, and of course it has the crafted crit chance, which even if it was unveiled would not be that beneficial. As you can see, it would add basically 4 to strength and intelligence if it was unveiled, and 7% to the crit. Now 7% to the crit is a decent chunk, sure. We would go from 8.12 to 8.58, but of course the amount of RNG required to do so would be truly insane. So let's talk about Havoc Mark and how this one was done. So the prefixes were done in the exact same way. The suffix for the +2 arrow was done in the exact same way. The attack speed was actually a Recombinator. So the way that this bow was done, which is absolutely crazy, is that this is actually a craft which was not done by us. It was done by a friend of mine called Quiddy. And what Quiddy did is that he had the first actual mirror tier bow in the league, but it was a non-synthesized bow. So he got the triple T1 via Recombinators, because recombinating prefixes on non-influence bases is relatively cheap. Then he got that with +2 arrows, of course, through recombinating some more. And eventually, he recombinated +2 arrow and T1 attack speed into one of the prefixes onto a base which had triple prefixes and the attack speed, so no +2 arrow. And he got really lucky. He actually got the triple T1 prefixes, the +2 arrow, and the T1 attack speed on a non-synthesized base. He crafted on crit chance, I believe, and that was basically his bow. Oh, actually, no. It didn't have, that's not right. Actually, it had unveiled double damage, if I remember correctly, instead of the crafted crit chance. So at that point, that was his bow. Now, he eventually, because it was a non-synthesized bow, he eventually synthesized it, so he threw it in the Harvest Synthesizer, and he got 16% physical damage on the implicit. Now, if he had gotten +1 arrow, his bow would still now be better than even Havoc Mark, but unfortunately 16% physical is what he got. So after that, a few days later, when we finished Entropy Twine, his bow stopped getting services because her bow was just significantly better. An additional arrow was just way better than even an extra 80 physical. So it was not even close. So he was like, well, you know what, this bow is not really serving any purpose, so I'm just going to 50-50 it. So what he did is he took his mirror bow, which was triple T1 prefixes, T1 attack speed, +2 arrow, and I believe crafted crit chance. Yeah, it was another bow that he had unveiled double damage on. Right, so he had the T1 attack speed, the +2, and the crafted crit chance, and he basically got another bow, which was synthesized with +1 arrow, with +2 arrow, T1 attack speed, and a single one of the prefixes, the physical prefixes, and he basically just said, you know what, I'm just going to recombinate it and see what happens. And he actually pretty much high-rolled every single thing that he could high-roll. He high-rolled the right base, so the synthesized +1 arrow base. He high-rolled the triple T1 prefixes. He high-rolled the +2 arrow, and he also high-rolled the T1 attack speed. And he also high-rolled an open suffix. So he basically just got the absolute lottery ticket of a Recombinator, and that is how he beat our bow without ever doing a single reforge attack to get his +2 arrows, because his bows were all done through just recombinating and alteration spamming and all that. So that actually made me quite angry. I was like, are you serious? Did you actually just do that? Like, our bow is now obsolete. We spent a lot more than you have. I'm annoyed. But turns out that Quiddy was like, well, you know what? You could just service it for me. I'm not going to be playing that much. I got school. I got work, blah, blah, blah. You're online. You can advertise it on your character because I've got a, very, very, end game character with multiple mirror tier items on it. Multiple mirror originals, I should say. So I said, yeah, sure, I'll service it for you. And of course, we're basically going to split the fees, and which is what we're doing. Now, why are we splitting the fees is because technically the prefixes are what's actually hard to get. It's relatively cheap, but it's annoying and it's kind of difficult. So we could actually make our bow entropy twine relatively easily into Havoc Mark by just augmenting speed. And if we fail, we would basically do prefixes or reforge keeping prefixes, and then we would do reforge attack until the +2 arrows, then augment speed. You know, if you hit prod speed, you can do cannot roll attack and annul. If you hit some bad attack speed, you basically have to YOLO 50-50 annul. It's a 1 in 9 for T1, so we'd take 4.5 times on average. Realistically speaking, it would only cost us, you know, a few mirrors, and we could get our bow to look exactly like his. But the thing is, there's no reason for any of us to do that, so instead we just decided to split the fees. And that is essentially how Havoc Mark, which is currently the best physical bow to ever exist in a temporary league. It has 995 physical damage with critical strike chance and +3 arrows. That thing is an absolute beast. But that's how it came to be. Now, I would highly recommend, I know that this video, you know, is basically me telling you guys how to do it step by step, but I would highly recommend you do not do this if you are actually trying to make currency. This is a very expensive process, and the problem with the very expensive process is also that you're never guaranteed to hit anything. You could easily spend a stupid amount of currency and just never get it. I would highly recommend, if you're interested in getting a bow like this, to mirror it, and if you don't want to mirror it, what you can do is spend roughly, you know, a third of the currency and just get a non-mirrored bow, and it'll have about 20% less damage or so from it, but you'll be saving, you know, 3 times the currency. So of course, mirror tier items are for the absolute 1%, 0.1%, people who want to push their characters to the absolute limit, but they're not necessary or mandatory in any build whatsoever. So anyways, hopefully this video was informative. Now I'll have videos in regards to the step-by-step guide on how we crafted every single one of our other items. So for those who are curious, stay tuned. That's going to be coming up probably 1 video a day. So we've got quite a few items to cover as if we were to look in our mirror shop. So hopefully these videos are going to be entertaining and also potentially open your eyes on how to do so yourself if you were to try to you know, replicate what we did in a future league, as long as Recombinators still exist, or if they don't, then with the previous methods of imprint spamming. Alright boys, before I go, I do want to say a huge thank you to my supporters. So Jaden and Rocky, Max, Mist, HKMZ, Thomas, Mass Mercury, Solomok, Alex, The Great Master, Nate, Tim, the other Alex, as well as the third Alex, Nailed, Talismar, Ando, Drago99, Faith, and Vision, anyone else who has supported me in the past, and anyone else who wishes to remain anonymous. That'll be Matthew signing out. Until the next one. Peace.